Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. It is important to remember that more people have died from sicknesses they suffered from working on the 9/11 site after the attacks than people who died in the attacks on that day. They are the first responders who had to breathe in the toxic air as they worked to save lives and rebuild America. The first to die was James Zadroga. The Zadroga 9/11 First Responders Health and Compensation Law is named after the New York City police officer. I spoke with his father, former police chief from North Arlington, New Jersey, Joe Zadroga. Chief, it is a pleasure to see you. I want to talk to you a little bit about your son. Everybody knows your name. Everybody knows your last name and your son's legacy because of the Zadroga Health and Compensation Bill for 9/11 first responders that bears his name. But I want to go back. I do want to talk about the bill, but I want to go back to 9/11 and your memories of that day.
Yeah, 9/11, my wife and I, we were in vacationing in Aruba that morning, turned the TV on, watching CNN, and they said an airplane just struck one of the World Trade Centers, towers. They didn't know it was an accident or not, and I'm going, yelling to my wife, no way that's an accident. It was a perfectly beautiful day that day, clear as could be. I said, no way is that an accident. I said, it's got to be terrorist attack. And a few minutes later, the second plane hit. And at that point, we knew that Jimmy was going to respond there, because Jimmy was the type of person, no matter what, he would go to dangers to help other people. And our main concern at that time was, my son, how he was going to react that day. We didn't get out of Aruba until 3 days later because they shut the airport down and so forth. We were supposed to leave the next day. And when we finally got home, we found out that Jimmy was at the site, and he worked there for approximately 3 weeks, 24/7, never leaving the site. The story goes is that he was driving on his way home. He had court that morning, and he was driving on his way home. He lived upstate New York, and he heard on the radio that the towers were struck. He knew right away that he was going to go back. He was only a mile or so from his house, so he figured he'd go home and change and go back. When he got there, his wife was just waking up, and she was 9 months pregnant at that time. And he told her what was going on, and she begged him not to go back. He said the hardest thing in his life to do was to go back that day. His wife was kneeling in the driveway crying, please don't go back, don't go back. He said, I have to go back. It's my duty, my job. Got to help these people. And he went back, and he spent 3 weeks there. When he came home, he was sick when he came home. He was coughing up black phlegm and other particles from dust and whatever was in there. And within a week, he was passing out. It was just, we were lucky that down the street was EMS personnel. He used to come running up with the oxygen for Jimmy because he couldn't breathe. So, that's how severe he was. As I told the story previously that I said, let's go to Columbian Presbyterian Hospital. They had the greatest pulmonologist in the world there. So we went and spoke to the doctor there. Doctor said, come back in 2 weeks. We came back in 2 weeks, and doctor sat us down in his plush office, and he said, I'm not going to treat you. We couldn't believe it. What do you mean? We said, why wouldn't you treat him? He said, all he would say is, I won't treat you. And he got up and walked out and left us in his office. As we were going down the elevator, I said to Jimmy, you're screwed. They're not going to help you. I see it coming. And
let me stop you there. Why did you think that right then? Why were you so certain at that point that they weren't going to help him at all?
I was in the military. I was a police officer at that time. Actually, I was chief of police department at that time. And I knew how government was. And I just had the feeling that they were going to just not treat them, disregard them, collateral damage, you want to call it.
So that early on, you think they started to cover this up?
I thought that year. As soon as this doctor told me we wouldn't treat him. So then I told him, let's go to, let's find another doctor, maybe find another doctor to treat you. And Jimmy worked street crime. He used to go to the firehouses to eat because he worked citywide. He knew which firehouses had good meals. So he would go and eat at the firehouses. I said, talk to the firemen that you know, find out who they go for lung problems, because obviously firemen always have lung problems from the fires. And they gave him a doctor in Westchester. Doctor in Westchester made an appointment. The doctor examined him, and he just came out and told him, he said, in 3 years, you're going to be blind. 5 years, you're going to be dead, unless they find a cure for you. And that's when we went on a crusade to find a cure for him. But every time he would go to the hospital, many times he went to the hospital to emergency. I can't count how many times he went to emergency and to the hospital, some passing out. And the doctors were good. They would say, we're going to help you. And your 9/11 respond, and we're going to do everything we can for you. 2 days later, they would ship him out of the hospital, tell him, we're not treating you. We can't treat you. And that went on for 5 years. Nobody would treat him. We contacted politicians that all the ones I knew as congressmen. They would say, we'll fight, we'll help you. And you call them back in a week, and they would say, either they say, we never heard of you, or we can't do nothing for you. We went through all the newspapers and news stations, TV channels. They would all originally say, yeah, it's a good story, the people that we talked to. But as soon as they went to the higher ups, they said, no, we're not going to do the story. We're not going to carry it. And it was just a conspiracy to shut everything down and make everything look rosy, and that nobody was getting sick. The police department would not help him at all. They wanted to fire him after that. They told me he was a malingerer, that he wasn't sick. And one day he'd go to sick call. The DEA told him that, as long as you report to sick call, which was in Learfrat Center in New York City, you report to the medical technicians for the police department. And they would, as long as you go there, they tell you to go back to work. You go back to work and then report out sick, and they can't fire you. So that's what he did for the next 4 years. You go there, they would tell him, you're not sick, you got to go back to work tomorrow. Or they say, well, take 2 days off and then go back to work. They refused to treat him or say that he was sick.
Chief, let me ask you a question. During this whole time, it was pretty obvious during this time that he got sick because of that toxic stew in the air after 9/11. Would anyone admit that to you at that point?
Oh, no, definitely not. Matter of fact, one time when he first went on oxygen, he went to the Learfrat Center to report off sick. They saw him with the oxygen. The other police officers in the room, they took him out of the room right away and put him in another room, because they didn't want these other officers to even know that he was sick. They didn't want nobody to know. They didn't want anybody to know that people were getting sick from 9/11. My wife would talk to other police officers, and they would cough. She'd say, you're at ground zero. I said, how do you know that? She said, I can tell from the cough you got. You got ground zero cough. That's when she starts talking about where the term came up, Walking Dead. She was the one that came up and said, the Walking Dead. Said, you're all going to die.
What did it take for someone to care, to finally someone to say this was connected?
Jimmy died. That's what took.
We will continue our conversation with Joe Zadroga after this. What did it take for someone to care, to finally someone to say this was connected?
Jimmy died. That's what took. When Jimmy died, there's a whole story. I go on for hours on the story, but he was living with us at that time because his wife passed away. She passed away from the stress of knowing that he was going to die. She just couldn't handle it. And she passed away. Heart condition, whatever you want to call it. She just gave up. So he had to come live with us, because at that time his baby was she was 2 years old at that time when she moved in with us. And when he passed away, it was in New Jersey. The medical examiner in New Jersey obviously didn't get the message to hide everything, and no one told him, Dr. Baden. So Dr. Baden put on the death certificate, he died from 9/11, from the dust in his lungs and the dirt in his lungs. And that's what finally opened it up. Bloomberg came on the air and tried to squash it by saying, who's this doctor from New Jersey? He's probably some senile old doctor. We don't know what he's talking about. He actually said that on air.
Wow.
And, when I called Dr. Baden up and told him that, he kind of really became on his side at that point. And it went on. And then the medical examiner in New York, Hirsch, called me and wanted a meeting with us, with the family. So I said, okay. I called my lawyer. I said, you think you should come with us? And the lawyer said, no, just go. It's probably nothing. They just want to discuss something with you. They called my lawyer and they said, you better be there with them, with the family. So we all went there. I sat down. I had a picture of Jimmy. I put it in front of the Dr. Hirsch. And I said, listen, we're talking about my son here. We're not talking about some object. I said, I want you to look at him as you're talking to me. He wouldn't even look at us, but he said, listen, if your family stops saying that your son died from 9/11, I won't go and say that he misused his drugs and was a drug addict. If you still insist that he died from 9/11, from the conditions of 9/11, I'm going to say that he misused his drugs, and that's what he died from, not from 9/11. And of course, we wouldn't agree to that. And he went out on the press right after the meeting. He went out and told them, that's in my opinion, and my examination of his tissues, that he died from 9/11. And he died from misusing his drugs or being a drug addict. And at that point is when it finally broke. We came home from that meeting. I think maybe it was the same day. There was all kinds of news people in front of the house. They have those vehicles with the antennas. They were all parked in front of the house. Lived on a dead end cul-de-sac, so they were all in front of the house. So we walked through them, and I talked to my wife, Linda, and I said, "Listen, we have two choices. We can tell them to leave. Don't bother us, like they told us for 5 years. Nothing happened, or we can become advocates and try to bring this to light to everybody else and what's going on with these 9/11 responders." And we felt that's what Jimmy would want us to do. And that's when we went out at that point and spoke to them, and we told them the story of Jimmy and how he died, how he suffered. And that's when we became advocates. And I went in front of a congressional committee after that to give testimony. And I gave the testimony. I was talking, and they gave you 5 minutes, and I wasn't even nearly done. And they said, no, just go on. So I went on for about 20 minutes.
Wow.
And Senator Hillary Clinton sent me a note. She said she wanted to see us and speak to us in the office. And that's when she became an advocate for the 9/11 responders. And she helped for Tyler Ann to get health benefits that she would have lost because of his death. And they were going to make special make a special what do you call it, in Congress or in the Senate in the state, stating that they would get it. The DEA called me and they said, listen, it's going to pass for Jimmy, but it may take a little while longer, but we would like to get everybody else included in the police and fire department into this legislation to get coverage. And of course we said, yes, of course. That's what it was all about. And at that point, we got it for Jimmy and the firemen. Later on, months later, they also got it for the rest of the 9/11 responders. And that's when we started going to Washington, D.C. at that point to get the legislation passed federally to take care of the responders.
Right. First of all, I'm so sorry you went through all that. Your son obviously died a hero, saving other people, and for anybody to question that had to be hell. Was there any vindication? Do you feel that there was any justice at this point because you got this passed and you helped so many other people?
Well, yeah, we helped the other people. Yes, I mean that made us feel that we accomplished something. Jimmy's death accomplished something. I mean, he helped thousands of people now to get medical coverage and care. And I always felt one thing that, if he got treated, maybe he could have got a lung transplant if they would admit that he was sick, and he might be alive today if he could have got a lung transplant. Matter of fact, we tried to, we went different hospitals, we went to New Jersey hospitals trying to get help there. The board even refused to treat him also. They wanted to discharge him without giving him any test or anything because they said insurance wouldn't cover it. And I said, Doc, this is DeBoer. My sister-in-law came here, got heart surgery, and didn't cost her a penny. This is a charitable hospital. Why are you worrying about money from insurance? And that's when he did some Gallium scan on his lungs, and you could see his lungs were 90% black. There was only 10% red. Then we would just before the last thing, we went to Pennsylvania. I figured maybe we could get a lung transplant. We went to Pennsylvania, and fortunately, the day he passed was the day we were supposed to go to Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, to see if he was a candidate for a lung transplant. And that was the day he passed away. And he, as I mentioned, he passed away in the middle of the night when he got up to get a bottle for his baby. And I found him on the floor in the morning with the bottle in his hand.
You've gone through 19 anniversaries of 9/11. We're coming up on the 20th. What do you go through on that day? What thoughts go through your head?
Well, every anniversary is the same. It's tough. They say, time heals. And something time doesn't heal. Every day you live it. You always think of his memory, what if, and, what if it didn't happen? What if they got medical treatment? And, it's the same as it was day one. It's 20th anniversary to us. It's the same as day one, the way we feel and suffer. You always constantly think of him. Raising his daughter, she's 19 years old now, going to college. So you see it every day. Every time she has something going on, you say, he missed it. She missed it. And, that's what the tough part, graduation, that type of thing. It's very tough.
No, I understand. I have 3 sons. I couldn't imagine losing one of them, and I don't know how it would go on. It's amazing that you fought the fight you did. You are a national hero, and so is your son. And I hope that brings you at least a little bit of solace on this day.
That's what I always say. One thing politicians are afraid of is a pissed off advocate.
Well, I will be remembering your son, as will a lot of people. You helped save a lot of lives. There's many first responders. I think it's important that people realize that more people have died since 9/11 because of 9/11 related illnesses than died on that day. And they might still be in the dark if it wasn't for you and your son. So thank you.
Yeah. And the best feeling I have is when somebody walks up and thanks us for the health care that they got.
Former North Arlington Police Chief Joe Zadroga. Still to come on Jersey Matters.
A new program is looking to help women and minority veterans pursue rewarding careers. More on that story next.